Hello, everyone. This is Natalie Matthews of ACT Associates, and I want to welcome everyone to today's webinar, which is entitled Sage Guidance for ESG Subrecipients. The focus today, of course, is going to be on how to utilize the Sage system to submit the ESG CAPR. And again, the focus today is on guidance specific for subrecipients, which is quite different from the guidance that was provided previously for recipients during a webinar that was held earlier this week. So a brief moment on logistics for today. So due to the high number of registrants and anticipated participants in our webinar today, everyone's phone lines are automatically muted when they enter the webinar room. So you will not have an opportunity to verbally communicate with us during the course of our time together today. However, you will have an opportunity to both ask questions or to send us more informal messages through the chat box. So to submit a question to us, which will rise to the level of getting a response from the team, we need you to please ensure that you submit all questions through that Q&A box. We see that several of you have done so already, and we appreciate that. If you're having a comment that you'd like to share or something that does not require a response, a comment, point of feedback, you can submit that via the chat box, and we will keep an eye on those as well. The session today is being both recorded and transcribed, so materials, which will again include recording of today's webinar, transcription, as well as the slide deck. All of that will be posted to the HUD Exchange website, and that'll be, again, your opportunity to access materials after today. We do work to get those up as soon as possible, but it does take a few days, so we are working to make sure that they are up there as soon as possible. And of course, we'll let you know when they're up. If you have registered for the webinar today, you should get an email saying when they're live. There are also two other resources that were recently posted to the HUD Exchange that are relevant for today's content. I have gone ahead and posted the direct links to those materials in the chat box. So all of you should have just received a message that includes a link to both the Sage ESG CAPR Guidebook as well as the Sage table shells. And the Sage table shells are in essence the report tables, so what you will see in Sage when you're working on the CAPR. The team today is listed up here on the screen. So we are joined today by Marlisa Grogan, who works for the HUD Office of Special Needs Assistance Programs, or SNAPS, Michelle Budzik of the Partnership Center, which is the entity that creates and manages the Sage website. And then again, I'm here, Natalie Matthews, to help moderate and respond to questions as they come in today. Briefly, I do want to go over, before I turn things over to Marlisa, what the learning objectives are today. So we're really going to focus in, because this is intended to be guidance for subrecipients, we're going to focus on guidance that will be most relevant to you all. So one of the first things that we will cover is the flow of data from your Homeless Management Information System, or your HMIS, to Sage. This is inclusive of guidance for victim service providers who may be utilizing a comparable database. We'll also go over coordination with recipients, so what are the expectations for you all as subrecipients in terms of working with your recipient, how to upload the ESG CAPR report into Sage, and then some common data errors and how to resolve that. We'll rely both on PowerPoint slides, but predominantly a live demonstration of the Sage system to go over those last two items in particular, and Michelle will be walking us through that demo once we get through the first two learning objectives. With that, I'm going to turn things over now to Marlisa Grogan so that she can go through the first couple sections of the webinar. Marlisa?
Hi everyone, my name is Marlisa Grogan. I'm the ESG team lead from the Office of Special Needs Assistance Programs at HUD, and I am grateful to have your attention for today's webinar. I've been in touch with a number of you, I'm sure, for eCart, and I know what a lot of you are thinking. We just got eCart under control. Now we're switching to something different, and how sudden this changes. But as I told recipients, what we're hoping to achieve by the end of today's webinar is to show you that the process is largely the same, and in many cases we've made it simpler. So, so bear with us, keep an open mind, and we'll point out where things are more user-friendly and, frankly, ways that we've heard where you were having difficulties, and how Sage really addresses those concerns now. So you've done the hard part in many cases from the eCart process. You've become familiar with downloading a CSV file. So the major difference is going to be where you upload that file. So now instead of sending it to your recipient, you're going to be uploading it in Sage. And so without the hassle of registering for a new system or anything like that, but it'll be a very straightforward link that you'll access. So more about that in a little bit. First, we want to get on the same page when it comes to terminology. We use terminology a little bit differently than you may be used to with your ESG recipient, but for purposes of this webinar, when we refer to ESG recipients, we're talking about the entities, the states, territories, cities, and counties that receive the ESG grant directly from HUD. So they're really HUD's ESG recipients. And when we are referring to ESG subrecipients, namely you all who are the focus of this webinar, we're talking about the local government or private nonprofit organization that receives an ESG sub-award for one or more ESG recipients. So this webinar is targeted for you, and we're going to get started into more detail. Next slide, please. So what is Sage? If you're not already familiar with Sage through the Continuum of Care program, we are sort of introducing this to you. It's an online portal for the submission of aggregate de-identified data from HMIS or comparable databases via a comma-separated value import. Access to Sage is not through registration for subrecipients. It's via a link that's emailed to you by your ESG recipient. So there's no login, no account setup. It's just keeping an eye on your email for a recipient that's going to come to you, for an email that comes to you from your ESG recipient, clicking on that link, and then following the prompts to upload your CSV file. I'm just including this to reiterate, subrecipients must not register for Sage because there's really no functionality in Sage for subrecipients. You're just accessing the system via a link, and it's only for the purpose of uploading your CAPER CSV report. Next slide, please. Here is the flow of data to Sage. So we're starting at the very beginning when you as providers are entering client-level data into your HMIS or comparable database, and we're following it all the way through submission to HUD's review of that data for the CAPER submission. So the first step is for you all to be entering data, which is just ongoing throughout the process. The second step, there's the dotted border, because this isn't really your role, it's your recipient's role for them to send you the link, the email link that's going to contain that link that you click on to upload your CSV. So it's the recipient's job to send you that link, and it's your job to just keep an eye out for your email, make sure you can receive emails from Sage so that you know when it arrives and you have access to that link. The third step, what we're recommending your recipients to do is to send a follow-up email to you to make sure that you've received the email with the link, and then to give you a little bit more information. So Sage doesn't set deadlines for your submission. it's going to be up to your recipient to fill in a couple of the steps of the submission process as far as when they want you to upload the data and any other particular steps that they want to include that's specific to your own recipient's process. The fourth step is for you as subrecipients to work with your HMIS lead to be able to generate the CSV ESG CAPER 2017 report. So that's the name of the report that's the name that we've used for the report that is generated from your HMIS or comparable database. Your HMIS administrator has programmed your system to be able to pull this report automatically. So it's important for you as subrecipients to be working with your HMIS lead to be aware of the HMIS updates that have been made so that this report reflects the 2017 HMIS data standards, to know that you can go into the system and generate that report, and also being aware of any glitches, of any programming errors that that might be flagged. So you want to make sure that that it's functional, that you're able to get it out of the system. The fifth step is for you to actually click on the upload link and to upload your CSV into Sage. So you're going to get the email, you're going to click on the link, upload the report, and then your job is done. That's a lot simpler than it's easier said than done, I know, but you're going to have Sage that's working with you to identify particular errors, as you're going to see when Michelle does the demonstration. So as different from in the past when you just sent your recipient the CSV file, and then you may or may not have been aware of whether it was going to work with eCart or not, and so there was a lot of back and forth. Now when you try to upload the CSV into Sage, Sage is going to give you an immediate response and pinpoint possible errors or things that you need to rectify before the system will accept that file. And then the sixth step is on recipients to check all the project level imports, so check your file, the rest of their subrecipients' CSVs, and then complete some data fields before they submit the report in Sage. And then the last step is for the field office to review that data and then communicate with your recipient about any questions or concerns. Next slide, please. So we're aware that a number of victim service providers have had difficulty pulling CSVs or for their comparable databases to have the functionality to produce CSVs that are automatically generated from their systems. So, you know, we're very aware that you all as victim service providers are still only permitted to enter data into the comparable database, that your CAPER reports have to be generated from that comparable database, and there still is the expectation that your comparable database has the functionality to do so. Sage is equipped to accept CSVs from comparable databases. They need to be updated to the 2017 data standards, so just as HMIS systems had to undergo that update for the 2017 data standards, comparable databases also must have that update. And if there are victim service providers out there that are not able to produce the CSV, you should be in contact with your ESG recipient for an exception template. So whereas for eCart, we would try to think through, based on particular situations, the best way to get that data external to eCart. Now for Sage, we have a template. It's meant to be used on a one-time only basis for one CAPER submission, with the understanding that you'd be working for, the next reporting period to be able to produce that CSV and have your comparable database have the functionality to produce that. But in the meantime, the exception template does allow manual data entry, and that Excel file can then be uploaded into Sage. So there would be, instead of an automatic CSV generation, it would be manual data entry and then clicking on the link and uploading that Excel file. So just so you all are aware, we're asking recipients to report on the number of exceptions that they grant, and we will be looking at those numbers from year to year to ensure that they're going down. Essentially, that recipients are making, subrecipients are making every effort to come into compliance as soon as they possibly can. So I can't reiterate this strongly enough that the one-time exception is meant to be a temporary one-time exception with the understanding that that you would come into compliance for the next reporting period. Next slide, please. So I've been mentioning the 2017 HMIS data standards, and I want to go into a little bit more detail because I think that there is some confusion about this October 1st, 2017 transition from eCart to Sage. And there's also the question that that you all must be having, do I have to start uploading my CSVs to Sage now, or should I be sending them to my recipient so that they could use eCart? So all of this really hinges on the state of your HMIS or comparable database system. So the 2017 HMIS data standards were effective as of October 1st, 2017. Your HMIS or comparable database should have been updated by this date, and if it has been updated as it should have been, the CSV ESG CAPER 2017 report will no longer work for eCart. So if you're pulling your CSV from your system and the updates were made the way they should have been, if your recipient tries to upload that into eCart, it won't work. It's a different case, though, if your system has not been updated on time. So any CSVs pulled by subrecipients after the update only going to work in Sage. If your system has not been updated, then that CSV will still work with eCart. If your recipient already submitted the eCart by September 30th, or if you sent them your file by September 30th, then this transition to Sage doesn't impact you. You wouldn't have to pull your report again just to get it into Sage. So it really depends on the timing of when you pulled your CSV and when your recipient is submitting the CAPER report. Bottom line, though, if there's any confusion, keep in touch with your HMIS lead to know if your system has been updated the way it should have been or not, and that will basically give you an indication of where your CSV should go. And we've communicated this to your recipient as well, so they should also be aware of the timing of this and where the CSV should go based on when it was pulled, the first factor, and the second factor, whether your HMIS has been updated to the 2017 data standards. Next slide, please. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to Michelle to show you all how to upload your CSVs with a demonstration. Michelle.
Michelle, can you hear us okay?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Perfect.
Good. Terrific. Thank you. I think in the transferring it wasn't working right. So good afternoon, everyone. We're going to take a look at Sage itself here and get started. So what I'm showing you is what the recipient actually does to generate an email link that's going to come to you that you're going to fill out and that they're going to attach then to their submission that will go to HUD. So this particular screen that you're seeing here now is not something that you would see, but what I want you to understand is that your jurisdiction has had to put in all of this information, that the organization's name, the project type, and identify a contact person for each project in your that they have funded. And it's by project, it is not by agency or organization. So the project, if an organization has two projects, Pleasant Street Housing here has an RH project called Pleasant Street and a project called Good Homes, and they are in two separate times because they were two separate awards granted from their jurisdiction for two separate projects. What happens is a link is created when the organization completes these cells up here. And the link automatically generates to you a email that looks like this. Here's the link coming over to you in an email that's coming from Sage at sagehmis.info. You might want to do yourself a little favor right now and put Sage at sagehmis.info into your contact or address books to try to help it actually come into your email system. But you'll get a link. It will tell you what to do. It gives you some other helpful links. But this link here is the link you will click on, and it will take you to your APR submission. If you clicked on that link, this is what you get. You get the information that says your organization name, the project type, the project name, and program year. Remember, if your organization runs an emergency shelter and runs an RH program, let's say, you will actually get two emails, and you need to make sure that the CSV that you're going to file with HUD is for the project type that you're seeing here on this screen. And so when you get an RH one, it will say RH. When you get an emergency shelter one, it will say emergency shelter. It will also tell you the project name that your jurisdiction named that project. And hopefully that's a name that you're going to recognize as it's your program, your project. The program year that is showing on the screen is pretty important for you to know that this is the year that you would enter into your HMIS or your comparable database as the start and end date of the caper that you're going to run. So typically when you go into an HMIS, you're going to select a report that's called CSV ESG Caper 2017. You're definitely looking for the thing that says Caper 2017. None of the other CSV reports are going to work for Sage, and your system should have several other CSV reports that are used. RAI uses some, and the APR uses some, so you really want to make sure you get the right CSV file. And then once you find that file, it's going to ask you what dates you want to run the report for. These are the dates. Every jurisdiction has different dates. If you receive a grant from the state and another grant from your city, which is very possible, many recipients do, the program years may be different between the city and the state, and so you need to pay attention to what is the program year that you need to run your report for. Running the report out of your HMIS is as simple should be as simple as pressing print and saving it onto your hard drive somehow. Once you have done that, the process of putting it in Sage is really easy. We're going to go into my computer system, and we're going to pick an emergency shelter file. I'm in an emergency shelter program here, and I have a CSV file created for an emergency shelter, and I'm going to go ahead and put that file into my link. There it is, right there. I'm going to tell Sage I'm not a robot, and I'm going to upload my caper. Maybe. It really doesn't take this long. There it is. And what happened was that my CSV file had an error in it. It was a structural error, and the error was because the file that I tried to upload, Sage believed had personal identifying information in it, PII, personally identifying information. Sage thinks you picked the CSV file that was intended to be uploaded to the Runaway and Homeless Youth Project instead of the CSV file that was intended to be used for the caper. When the Runaway and Homeless Youth folks send their information over, it does have some PII that's de-identified, but it still reasonably looks like PII, and it'll get thrown out. Your file cannot have personally identifying information. So I uploaded the wrong file now, and I need to fix that. So I'm going to go back into my files and look for the right file, and I'm going to click on that. There it goes. I'm not a robot. Upload my caper, and now it went in, and it's fine. You know it's fine because Sage tells you the upload passed all validations. You will see these identifiers. What you're seeing is that this is from the Safe Shelter, Shelter A. It's Shelter A, right? That's where it's supposed to come from. It is, the project type says it's an emergency shelter, and this is the report that says this is how many people you served this year. If you upload it and you find out that, whoops, I uploaded my RH file instead of my shelter file, you just go right here again, press Browse, pick the right file, and upload it. It doesn't go to the jurisdiction until you actually tell it to. Once you tell it to attach to the jurisdiction, it leaves here, it goes over, it lodges itself into Sage, and the jurisdiction has control of it. Once you've submitted and attached it to the jurisdiction, you cannot do that again. It's locked. It's there. You've made your submission. The jurisdiction can send it back to you if they get it and they say, hey, wait a minute, this is emergency shelter, this has 100 beds and you're telling me you only serve 16 people? No way is this report right. We're throwing this out, we're sending it back, you guys got to do this again. So they can send it back, they can reject it, they can say it's not what you're supposed to be doing, but you can't pull it back yourself at this point. At the point that you press attached to the jurisdiction, you're done. I want to go back and show you a couple of other errors that are common with a CSV upload, just so that you understand what the error means in case you get it. Part of the biggest problem with the COC has been that folks didn't always understand the error messaging. So we've tried to do that a little bit better for you so that you have more information about what's wrong with the file when you get it. In this particular case, it's a structural error. The CSV file has to be set up exactly like the HMIS programming specs for the APR and COC CAPR have specified. Has to have 27 files, has to have the right number of rows and columns in each one of those files. The rows and columns have to be named correctly. It's a structural problem. So if you get an error that says it's a structural error, it means your CSV was not created right. You, as the subrecipient, cannot fix your CSV file. You didn't create it. The HMIS created it, so you can't fix it. And frankly, HUD has asked all of the vendors to lock their CSV files so that you couldn't manipulate the data once it came out of the HMIS. So if you get a file that says it's a structural error and you haven't been in the file messing with it, then it's a problem that was caused by your vendor, and you need to call your HMIS lead and ask them for assistance. They may already know that there's a problem with this from the vendor because they've heard it from another subrecipient, or you may be the first one to report this, and then they'll have to go back to the vendor and get it fixed. You may email yourself this message. Some of the messages are longer, and to help you not have to write out the messages, if you get an error, you can enter your email address, press go, and you'll have that error message sent to you, so you'll be able to forward it to your HMIS lead or whoever you need to forward it to. So that's another kind of error. That's a structural error. Let me show you what it looks like if you're missing files. Okay. So here we go. Here's the structural error when you have files missing. So it's possible that somebody just missed putting in these questions in your CSV export. At that point, then your export has to be changed and corrected, and again, that's a vendor issue. And the last kind of error that you may get that is potentially more your error, but also probably a vendor's, is a validation error. So there are validations on every question in the report. Last year, many ESG subrecipients put in reports that were not even close to being in balance. Sage is not going to let you do that. HUD let you do that with up to a 25% error rate the first year, knowing that it was shelters and they were getting used to HMIS and they were getting used to pulling out the reports from it, and all of that was going to be difficult and different. At this point, you're pulling a CSV just like you did before, and you're importing it into Sage. And so HUD has put validations on all the questions, which means if you served 100 people in your shelter, you should have races for 100 people, sexes for 100 people, ages for 100 people. And in the case where the client didn't know or the client refused or the information was just missing, there's lines in the report for that too. So whether you actually know how many males and females you had, or you know for 99 people how many males and females you had, and for one person they refused to identify, you can put in and you collect that as client doesn't know or client refused in your system. That generates into the report saying client doesn't know, client refused, and there's still 100 sexes then in the table, and that balances to 100 people. And every one of the tables is going to balance to something. There's information in the back of your guidebook on the validations, and it will actually tell you what that error means. So if you take a look at the guidebook, if you get an error and you say, wait a minute, I think my stuff is all perfect, and you get in there and take a look, it's going to show you what that means. In general, you can't make the report wrong. Your data is your data, and unless you have the ability to totally skip data in your system, at which point it should count as missing information, the report should come out without validation errors from your vendor. However, again, because some of you use different systems, that, there is the possibility, I guess, that you made the report and so made the error, and so we show you in the guidebook, in the back of the guidebook, all of the errors that are possible. I just want to go through real quickly. If you're a DV provider, you're going to get a DV provider that has asked for and received your one-time exception to filing a CSV, that you'll file the exception. In order to get the template, the jurisdiction has to have approved your ability to get an exception. They turn the exception on. You click here, and you're going to download an Excel file. You're going to complete that Excel file, and then just like everybody else with the CSV, you're going to upload that file into Sage through your link, and it's going to do exactly the same thing that the other ones did. It's going to tell you how many people, it's going to tell you what it is, it's going to say, yes, it's right, and you're going to attach it to the jurisdiction. You have the ability to not have the correct program type on yours, just like the other CSV file does. And when that happens, it looks like this. And this is the error that I think would be the most common error for you, an error that says the project type is wrong. So you remember that the jurisdiction has identified the project type for you in Sage. They put that in on their end and said you're an emergency shelter. And we expect that if you're an emergency shelter, your HMIS is going to come out saying it's an emergency shelter. But we know there are transitional housing projects that are grandfathered in to ESG. If you're a transitional housing project that's grandfathered, your jurisdiction should have set you up in a project type that says transitional housing. And if they didn't and you get this error, then you're going to have to go back to them and say, hey, wait a minute, I'm a grandfathered transitional housing project. If, however, you're an emergency shelter and it's coming out the other way, it's telling you that the HMIS file is saying you're something that you're not, then you're going to want to go to the HMIS and say, hey, you've got our HMIS project type set up wrong. That's a very simple fix that the HMIS system administrator makes, and you run your CSV again and upload it. So we're telling you exactly what the error is here, and you would be able to know how to correct that then. I think we should take questions. I should stop for questions. I did see the one question that I think is one for me, and then Marlisa can take the next ones. But the question is, if the state sends the money, their ESG money, to a local government, and then the local government goes down and subs it to, kind of subs it to the nonprofit, the shelter, who is going to get this link? Is the local government going to get a link for every one of the projects, or is the nonprofit going to actually get the link for every one of the projects? And that is a scenario that has lots of possible different answers, and it's between the local government and the state to set it up. The local government could actually come in and be given rights to Sage as a recipient and be doing all of that setup and stuff and gathering it all in, and as long as the state presses submit in the final caper, the local government could be doing that. Or the local government could provide to the state the list of all the nonprofit actual direct service providers for them to upload, and we have an upload template for that. You could fill out the template, and the state could send the template right on over to the nonprofit. So there's a couple ways that can happen. Either way, it is doable and workable. Marlisa?
Okay, hang tight. I'm going to unmute Marlisa. She might be having some phone issues. So another question that's come in for you, Marlisa, to sort of talk through is there seems to be a decent amount of concern amongst participants today about just really not being sure if they are the right entity that should be submitting these reports in Sage, and if they are, how do they know for sure? And some other folks really sort of pointing to not really getting much information on this and instead being used to submitting information via their, like a spreadsheet to their recipient. So any thoughts on that that you want to share about the transition or sort of who should be doing what in this process?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you now. It's all good.
Okay, great. So as Michelle said, there are a lot of different variations for the relationship between subrecipients and recipients. And sometimes there are pass-through entities. So the example that someone gave about the state subawarding funds to a local government who then sub-awarded funds to a nonprofit, that's a really good example. And I guess so it's important to keep the overall structure of how this works in mind. The recipient is going to go into Sage and they are going to identify the subrecipient or the sub-subrecipient that's going to be responsible for uploading the CSV. And they're going to do that by entering into the data fields that Michelle has up on the screen right now. They're going to enter the project name, project type, contact email. So it's really up to the recipient to put in that person, that contact email for the person who's actually going to upload the CSV file. So in some cases, the recipient may make the decision, the state might make the decision, okay, we want our local government to really have an eye on all of the CSV reports that get uploaded before we see them. So the state might say, I'm going to put the local government in for all 10 of the projects that local government subawards funds for. And in that case, you might be in touch with the local government to send the CSV files there. Or the state might do something completely different and say, since all of the nonprofits that ultimately get the funding, the homeless providers, they're the ones who are entering the data, so we are going to enter in their contact emails, you know, keeping the pass-through entity in the loop, hopefully, but giving the link to the providers who are entering the data so that they can directly upload the CSV file. The best thing to do, though, is to be in touch with your recipient or the pass-through entity to see how you as a community want to structure this. And I would also say, I think in response to another question, some recipients were aware they have their own reporting systems, and sometimes they like to get more frequent reporting from their subs. So you may be submitting a spreadsheet, and that might just be an internal process that your recipient has. So I would be in contact with them about Sage and about this transition to see what next steps they want you to take. If you're really unfamiliar with the concept of a CSV file, or you know that your HMIS, your comparable database, can't produce one, a good first step is to talk to your HMIS lead and just ask them, what's a CSV? Can our system generate one? Why or why not? And then you can always contact your recipient if you can't, and then in turn the AAQ to see what next steps you need to take, because it is the expectation, it is HUD's expectation that all HMISs and comparable databases have the functionality to generate a CSV report directly from the system. And that's just to minimize data error and to assure us that we're getting the data that's reflecting exactly what's being entered into the system.
Great, thanks Marisa. Another question, Michelle, for you to help us through. And just as a reminder, we can see your screen right now. So I hope you're eventually sharing something. But the question is just really clarifying for folks what a CSV file is. We got quite a few questions from people just really not being sure what it is, or if they should be generating in it, and if they are supposed to be, just sort of, you know, should their vendor, their HMIS vendor, or their comparable database vendor sort of already be aware of this process? So any thoughts about CSV and about vendor communication on this?
Sure. So the vendors are provided HMIS programming specifications for the APR and CAPR, and they were provided those months and months ago. They were expected to have those reports available to you in the HMIS system on October 1st of this year. So all of this is spec'd out completely for the vendors, and the vendors have clear information about what's supposed to be in a CSV file. If you opened a CSV file, you would see this. Here's all your questions. It is just a group of questions that comes out. If you open it, it tends to open in Excel on most computers, even though it's not an Excel spreadsheet. And it has the actual question and the actual number in the specific rows and columns that are required. So all that it's doing is putting the answer to the questions in the form and sending that APR report form over to you to use to upload. It's a way to move data around. CSV means comma separated value, and when this actually goes into the machine, it goes in with 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, so that it's all it's all reading exactly correctly and being pulled exactly out of the same place. So that's what a CSV is, and that's what it looks like if you've got the right thing in your hands.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Michelle. So another question that came in about whether or not this is sort of continuing on the CSV train of questions. Our CSV files, if they're in a zip report, do they need to upload each individual CSV file, or will the zip file include all the files that they'll need to upload?
Your file from the HMIS should come down to you in a zipped file.
Okay. So that means that everything should be in
right.
there. Okay.
Yep. Right. So if you get the zip message, it's probably because you zipped a zipped file and kind of double zipped it, double embedded it, if you will. So once these all come into a file, the file looks like this, and I can't make this bigger for you. It has a little zipper on it. You know you've got a zip file versus a regular file because it literally has a little zipper there.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Other questions that have come in. Okay, so we've gotten quite a few questions as well around deadlines. So Marlisa or Michelle, whoever's sort of most comfortable jumping in, any sort of general guidance that you can give around when CAPER reports are traditionally submitted, what deadlines subrecipients usually have for submitting them, and lastly, whether or not subrecipients should have already received that upload link that Michelle was sharing some information on. So any thoughts on that part?
Sure. So for recipients, their CAPER is due once a year. It's 90 days, within 90 days after the end of their program year. So your reporting period for your CSV is going to be your recipient's program year, and it all depends on what that is. That's their deadline, and so it's very likely that your recipient is going to set a deadline that's sooner than that, and that varies widely from recipient to recipient. Some start wanting to see data months in advance. Some have, their reporting their own individual reporting requirements. So it's really important to contact your recipient for information about when they want the CSV uploaded. You're going to receive an email with an upload link that comes from Sage. And as I mentioned in the data flow, we're recommending that your recipient send you an additional email after that email from Sage goes out, to confirm that they sent the submission link out to you, and to also include a deadline so that you know exactly when you need to have the CSV uploaded by. So I guess the bottom line is just be in close contact with your recipient so that you know when to expect to get the upload link and the submission link, and how much time you have to get it in there.
Perfect.
Let me also clarify another thing that folks keep asking in different ways in the questions. Unlike the APR, the CAPER takes project by project information. So if you run a regular homeless project for homeless families, you're running a shelter, that should go in as one project. If you also run a separate facility for DV clients that's covered under VAWA, then you would have a separate link for the DV. You don't combine this stuff for CAPER. You only combine these files for an APR. So if it's a separate project in your HMIS system, it should be a separate project coming into the CAPER. The CAPER should not blend 6 different transitional housing projects together and let you bundle those and upload them all at once. Each transitional housing project, even if the same provider provides it, needs to go in separately.
Okay, great. Thank you, Michelle.
Sure.
All righty. Just double checking real quickly. I think we've gotten to most of the questions that can be addressed. Looking again if there's anything new coming in. All right, so due dates, upload. So one quick piece that would also be helpful to reinforce, Michelle, is I think early on in the demo you shared an email address for folks to make sure that they save right to their favorites or their safe list to make sure that when they do get that upload email link that it's you know, securely delivered and not sent to junk or trash. Would you mind just sharing that email address again, and I can type it into the chat box for folks too in case that's helpful.
Sure. It's Sage at sagehmis.info.
Okay, .info. Perfect. All right, and I did go ahead and type that in the chat box for folks in case they did not hear that or want to go ahead and double check that. All right. Marlisa or Michelle, David or Tuan, everyone that's sort of on the line looking at the questions. Anything else for a final question or item before we wrap things up today?
There's one question that I was just typing out, so I can just answer it to make sure it gets in there.
Sure.
The CAPER, the overall CAPER submission requirement is a recipient level requirement. So the states, territories, local governments that get funds directly from HUD, so they've got a grant agreement with HUD, they are the ones who are responsible overall for the CAPER submission. And they have the responsibility to work with you, their subrecipients, to ensure that they get the data via the CSV files. So that's sort of how it works. If you're a subrecipient, in other words, you have a grant agreement with the recipient, not with HUD, then you need to work with them to know exactly what your responsibilities are and how they want you to report. But it's the recipient's responsibility to submit the overall CAPER report to HUD.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, great clarification. I do want to also, just as a quick reminder, as we go back to just wrapping things up, that there are two resources that were just made available that will hopefully help you guys in terms of getting acclimated with Sage and understanding the process. So one, of course, again, is that guidebook that goes over some of the definitions that we've talked through today, some of the communication expectations that we talked through in terms of recipients and subrecipients, as well as what the CSV upload process is. So if you're leaving today and you still, want to double check what exactly is a CSV or what does this do, please make sure that you reference that guidebook. And the link for that, again, is also in the chat box. Michelle, were you going to say something else? Sorry, I thought I heard you. I was trying to say something. All right, my bad. So please do that. And then also, of course, you can go to the Ask a Question desk. That is a way for you to get guidance from HUD on this directly. I'm going to quickly just take the presenter ball back and go ahead and go through that last slide or so. So in terms of next steps, please make sure that you work with your HMIS lead agency to make sure that you can generate the reports that we've talked about. This guidance also rings true if you are a victim service provider using a comparable database. Please make sure that you're working with your vendor as well. If you run into any issues, please make sure that you are, of course, following that exemption process that Marlisa talked us through today. Again, Sage Guidebook is now both on the Sage website and the HUD Exchange website, and will reinforce and give further detail on everything we've talked about today. And then, of course, as one last reminder, we will be posting the slide deck that we've gone through today, as well as a recording and transcription of today's webinar on the HUD Exchange website. And just want to thank you guys again for your time and attention today. And please do not hesitate to let us know if you have any further questions after our time together. Enjoy the rest of your day.